Kia ora, I'm Sally Woodfield, Communications and Marketing Manager for Whānau Marawa, New Zealand International Film Festival. Welcome to tonight's live Q&A following the online premiere of The Girl on the Bridge. We're delighted to have you here joining us tonight, and I'd like to welcome Jazz Thornton and Leanne Pooley to join us live from Christchurch.
Hello. Hi.
They've just come direct from an in-cinema screening and a Q&A from down in Christchurch. Thanks, Jazz and Leanne, for coming in and joining us tonight, and also for sharing this raw, intimate, and such an important story and such an important journey that you've both gone on in making this film. I thought we'd start tonight to talk about how this all came about, because we see in the film Jazz is pitching for funding to make Jessica's Tree, and that's kind of the gem of where that's kind of the seed of where this idea of the documentary came about. Leanne, would you like to tell us some more about that?
Sure. So when Jazz pitched the web series, she won the pitch, and she was approached by numerous producers who were going to come on board and make the web series. And she decided to go with Cass and Alex, and they approached me to potentially maybe mentor Jazz a little bit while she was making the web series, because she was in term 2 of film school, and they thought maybe it would help if she had a filmmaker alongside her to help a little bit with the web series. So I came to a meeting to talk about that, and within about a minute of the meeting, I thought, actually, I don't want to help with the web series. I want to make a film about the making of the web series and the journey that I knew Jazz would go on to tell that story, and to try and be part of that conversation, make it a bigger conversation.
And Jazz, was it an instant yes? How did you feel about it?
No, it wasn't an instant yes. It didn't take me a long time, but I think the idea for anyone to have cameras following you, with anything to do with life is scary, but to have someone like Leanne follow me as a filmmaker doing my first ever kind of big project was scary as well. But also knowing kind of, I think the journey in itself was going to be big without the cameras, and so to add them on, I can't remember how long it took, but I remember just kind of talking to these guys and thinking, if it helps one person, then it's worth it. And so I agreed, and here we are. It was a good decision. I'm glad I made it.
Oh, away, I think, and I think that the impact that it's going to have is going to be enormous. Because in the film, there's some moments when you just, your heart bleeds as a viewer. And the experience of doing that and actually having someone filming some of those very raw moments, you're very brave and open to do that. Tell us how that felt to you watching it again now.
When I watched it for the first time, there was a lot of stuff in there that I don't think I realized what was going on. And, I had people telling me for the whole time that we were filming it, Jazz, you can't be doing that. Jazz, you can't be on the phone to the crisis team all the time. You can't be the world counselor. And it was only when I watched it for the first time that I understood why everyone was so annoyed at me for so long during it. Because I was like, oh my gosh.
We weren't annoyed. We were worried. She keeps saying we were annoyed. We weren't
No,
annoyed.
I'm not saying you. Everyone in my life was annoyed. Everyone was like, Jazz, you can't do this. Like taking my phone off me. And I was watching it and I was like, oh my gosh, take my phone off me. Like, well, I can't do that. Why are you doing that, Jazz? And so, watching it back now, there is a lot of stuff that I say and do in that film that I would never say or do now. And I think that's the growth of it. That's, learning as we go. And there's so much that's happened in the last, 3 years that since we've been shooting this and it's been edited and come together. It's weird looking back at it because I'm like,
well, you didn't even remember everything. I mean, no. It was a 2-year journey. We shot hundreds, hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of material. So Jazz didn't remember everything that had happened. So it was kind of a
Plot twist, I didn't see that coming, but it was my life. But yeah.
Well, it's incredible actually, because when you look back as well, also about the ways that suicide has been treated in the media, particularly in years ago, you didn't. I was a journalist years ago when you did not talk about suicide at all. In fact, we weren't allowed to talk about suicide. And then on the flip side, you look at the scene in your film when the New Zealand Herald does a story on you, and there's this big sensationalized headline, which then gets all this trolls and feedback that really is not helpful. Such a difference there and the distance between them. Tell us about that whole idea around the idea of making a film about suicide and how you tracked the themes that you follow in terms of like finding a hopeful message through.
Well, it sort of unfolds when we started. I mean, what's interesting is when we started, the project was actually called, Jessica's Tree was called The Silence Project, and the film was called The Silence Film. And that's one of the things that changed over the course of 3 years. I mean, we're not really silent anymore about it. The subject is in the world, and people like John Kerwin are talking about mental health. And so that's was an interesting part of the trajectory of just the society we're in. We didn't feel that silence was what we were talking about anymore. I think one of the things that developed as we went on the journey with Jazz is it was clear to me that she was on a journey to try and come to terms with Jess's death, and that her work on Jessica's Tree was her working through that guilt and that experience. And that, so for me, it became clear that the arc of the film was actually, as well as all the sort of messaging and the important things we wanted to explore in terms of the conversation, it was also about Jazz coming to terms with the fact that she couldn't have saved Jess, that she had to learn to forgive herself really for that. And that's the message of the film, that we can only do so much to help people fight for their lives. And at the end of the day, they have to fight themselves. And those of us who have been touched by suicide shouldn't be beating ourselves up, because it's not down to us at the end of the day, it's down to them. So the arc was really clear to me, but I'd say about halfway, I think, was that it was a journey that Jazz was going on, that almost everybody who's dealt with suicide goes on.
And it became a bit of a personal journey for you as well. I understand through this, you life met.
Yeah, so I lost my brother to suicide while we were making the film, and I learned a lot. I mean, it seemed weird, it was a strange and terrible time, and I thought briefly about maybe walking away from the film, but then it seemed like that the film was the perfect place for me to be in that moment, and it helped me, I think.
Jazz, the global impact of what you're doing is massive. The book, the Voices of Hope movement, the fact that the trailer on our channel alone had 180,000 views, which that's just on our YouTube channel, the Film Festival YouTube channel. I don't know what it was like on yours. It must have just been well up there. How does this, you've been involved in launching the Global Mental Health Campaign, you've been to Buckingham Palace, you're involved with the World Health Organization. How does this sit with you?
Spoke at the United Nations.
Spoke at the United Nations. How does all this sit with you? You're 25 years old.
I think it's all happened relatively fast. But I think for me, I can do all of that and not be fully overwhelmed by it, because I know my why so strongly. And I think that, for me, every single thing that I do is about the individual who is on the other side of it, who feels like they can't go on anymore. And so every time that I, get up in front of people like the UN General Assembly with the world leaders, or the royal family, or anything like that, while it's a big platform, it's always about affecting change for the one. And we've been able to see that kind of turn into being hundreds of thousands, turning into millions, and it's overwhelming, but it's amazing to see that the art of sharing stories and people actually speaking up from lived experience is starting to see change in the world.
We've had a few questions coming in. Just a reminder to people that you can text in your questions to us. One of the questions is how you're hoping the film will affect positive change on New Zealand's mental health responses.
It's about encouraging the conversation for a start. It's about hopefully also putting pressure in the places where we need to have pressure to make actual change. I mean, the film encourages, hopefully, or says to people that they should ask for help. It's okay to ask for help, but it's really important that when people ask for help, there's help there. So it's the two sides of that equation. It's not okay to say to everybody, ask for help, and then if there's no help when they ask, then the exercise isn't effective. So, you know, if we can get people talking about the issues. Also, hopefully the film opens the door and gives people a few things that can specifically be used. I mean, Jazz gives so much valuable insight into just things you can say to people that you know, acknowledge their pain. Don't try and sweep the pain under the ground. Don't say people are selfish because they think they're a burden. You know, it just gives us a window that hopefully allows us to understand a bit better. And if we can understand a bit better, perhaps we can be part of the change.
Yeah, and I think with that, you know, we've been telling people to ask for help for so long, which is really important. But what's interesting about the film is that you see people every day asking for help, but they are asking for help from me who doesn't know them. They, for some reason, don't feel like they can go to their parents, that they can go to their counselor, that they can go. So there's been a lack in our society where people are wanting to ask for help, but now it's about society offering help and not being afraid to have these conversations and breaking down these stigmas. So many young people are terrified of asking for help, unfortunately, from the older generation, because they think that they're just going to be slammed as attention seekers. I'm sorry. I
am the older generation.
But it's true. Like, so a lot of the people that reach out to me are young people, and they should be going straight to their parents. They should be going to their school counselors. They should be going to their teachers. But there's been this breakdown in communication where, because of this lack of understanding, they don't feel like they can do that. So I think, you know, there's so much that needs to change in systems, yes, but there's also so much that needs to change in society. And I think that that's what this film is starting to open up, is it's okay to have these conversations. Don't be scared of it. You're not going to make someone suicidal by asking the question, are you suicidal? So all of those kinds of things as well, I think.
And even the fact that, you know, you saw in the film the horrible trolling that came out when the film was announced that we were making it. But when Jessica's Tree went out, there was hardly any trolling. Yeah. The New Zealand Herald only had to pull down 2 comments.
Right? It doesn't happen.
Thousands that came in.
Doesn't happen with a show about suicide ever, so
really interesting.
It is really interesting, and I think that, you know, with the you know, your book and with the film and Jessica's Tree, which I watched again today, and it's, you know, it's just such a beautiful story and a beautiful piece of work, and just something that's so inspiring for people to be able to watch that, and watching you talk about it is you know, and the way that we're now able to talk a bit more, and there's more out there, you know, Rob Mokoraka's play Shop Bro and things like that, which are really opening. You know, do you feel that the windows are opening? Do you feel that there's kind of more conversation happening?
Absolutely, 100%. I think what I love so much is that, you know, at the beginning, like Leanne said, this was called the silence film. And, you know, as you were saying, that the media weren't able to report on it, but the reason that our government invested $1.9 billion was because there was so much public pressure. It was on the front page of every paper. Every, you know, TV show was covering this mental health epidemic that we have here in New Zealand, where people were talking about these high youth suicide rates. It was a collaborative effort of everyone starting to talk about it, media starting to pick it up, people talking about it on social media, that forced the government to act. I don't think that they would have acted had they not had the full public pressure of it. It was the same with the climate movement, that the whole UN General Assembly got moved to be about climate because of the public outrage. And I think that's what's happened here in New Zealand, is that we're starting to see the conversation really shift. And now it's shifting from outrage to, okay, what can we actually do to help? What are the solutions? How do we do this? How do we band together and make change?
And there's no easy, you know, if it was easy, would have happened. You know, no one wants. One of the things about this issue is it transcends socioeconomic groups. You know, when I tell people that this is the subject I'm working with, almost to a human, I get a story back. You know, my cousin, my auntie, my first boyfriend, whatever, you know, almost, and it doesn't matter where people come from or how much money they have or any of those things. It really is an issue that it's ubiquitous, and so
it's touched everyone's life at some point in some way. We have got quite a few other questions here. Question for Leanne. Who do you hope gets to see this film, and what message would you like them to receive?
Well, it's interesting. We talked a lot about, when you start a film, you talk quite a lot about audience. And, you know, Jessica's Tree was kind of made to speak to young people. And we kind of feel that my film, even though I'm not against, you know, I hope young people find their way to the film, and I think they are. I do think it also speaks to parents and to people who are dealing with people who are suicidal. So not necessarily suicidal people, but the people around them. But, you know, you just hope as many people, which is everyone, yeah. You hope as many people as possible see every film you make.
Well, when you see both in the film, in The Girl on the Bridge and in Jessica's Tree, when you see Jess's parents and see, you know, it's just, it is, isn't it? It's just, they're so brave, and it's so heartbreaking watching them dealing with it.
So humbling for us.
So, you know, what you're saying about the film being for parents, for teachers, for, you know, everyone dealing with it is so true. Jazz, question for you. What do you think people can do to comfort and open the conversation for those seeking help?
I think that, to be honest, a lot of it has kind of sat within the way that we have, I guess, been brought up on the way that we do relationship, which is on one phrase, the phrase of how are you? We, you know, it's what we start almost every conversation with, but we are so used to it going, hey, how are you? Yeah, good, thanks. How are you? Move on with your day. To the point that we actually don't know what to do when someone says, oh, I'm not actually doing well, because that's not what we've been trained to do. That's not what we've been trained to say. So I think it's starting to retrain that conversation. And, you know, when you ask the question, how are you? And if they don't, oh yeah, good, thanks. How are you? No, how are you really? Because what that's going to do is that it, you know, in the early terms, it starts to open up the conversation so that when someone starts to feel this way, they don't wait till they get to crisis to ask for help, because they know that you're okay to have the conversation about how you're feeling. So I think that's a really good way to start. But also the biggest thing, if you feel like someone is suicidal, asking them the question, are you suicidal, does not make them think that that is now an option. So don't ever be scared of triggering someone to become suicidal from asking it. As someone who has been in that place, it is actually the most relieving thing, because the door's been opened and, oh my gosh, I can actually talk about this. I've had permission to talk about this. So yeah, that's probably the main things that I would say. And just consistency. Sometimes it's going to take time for someone to talk to you. Don't give up after the first try. Just keep asking, keep asking, keep asking.
Also, you have said to me too that sometimes you need to be the person that says, let's go to the doctor together. Let's you and I go and see the counselor or whatever. Be the person that goes with them. You know, take
help them find that first step forward to getting help.
Yeah.
Question for you both, really, and I think I'll expand on this one. The question is, throughout the process of making the film, were you concerned for your own mental health or for that of the team?
Well, it's the first time ever, and I think this does show how things have changed. There was a line in the budget from the funding that the Film Commission put up for therapy for the team. So we actually had money in the budget that Jazz, it was actually part of the agreement that Jazz would take advantage of this, because we knew how much pressure would be on Jazz. But there was actually money there for all of us. If any of us wanted to go and talk to a therapist, if anyone on the team felt, you know, that what we were dealing with was bringing up things for them, there was money in the budget for us to go and see a therapist. Now, there's no way that would have happened 10 years ago. And, you know, no way. But also the other thing was, it was it was very women. There were a lot of women on this project. You know, the producers are women. My editor was a woman. I'm a woman. Jazz is a woman. So there was a lot of hugging. There was a lot of hugging. I've never been on a production with so much hugging. And I think there was a sense that people were keeping an eye on each other.
Yeah. And I think as well, like for me, you know, it was an intense time, and it's definitely not slowed down at all. I now respond very differently to what I did, but I've got the most incredible network of people that these guys were in communication with. So if they were like, oh, is she okay? They could just, you know, call them. So it was a very open kind of communication between people in my world and people in the film as well. So that, I was never concerned for my mental health. It was a lot of pressure, but I was not.
But we do show concerned. In the film, you know, the film shows that there was at least one moment where we were worried for Jazz, you know, and hard conversations were had.
And then you rang the people in my life, and they were like, "Oh no, she's fine, she's okay." But they didn't know me well enough to know that I could handle that.
Yeah. Actually, someone's asked this question, and it was also a question I had as well. As I mentioned before, we've had 180,000 views just of the trailer on our YouTube channel. And some of them, unfortunately, you know, I've had and lots of comments, which, you know, we reply to, but a lot of them are asking, and a lot of them are overseas in terms of them asking if where can I see it? I'm in Holland, I want to see this film. I'm in the USA, I'm in Canada. And unfortunately, you know, while we are at home online for all of New Zealand, we can't show any of our films.
The producers are I mean, I think it will be, there's not a done deal, but it will be available internationally, hopefully in the not too distant future.
That's good news. I think that's good news, because I think that, you know, the work that you, Jazz, and now, you know, Leanne doing in terms of like the global understanding and global message is becoming so important.
Well, and Jazz is a huge global following in the sense that you're getting 12 million views a week on TikTok. 12 million.
It's crazy. That's incredible, really. Our biggest New Zealand export, Jazz.
It's actually funny. My US following is like 40 times bigger than my New Zealand following, obviously, because the US is way bigger than New Zealand. So we're definitely excited for it to eventually get overseas, because there's a lot of people over there.
It speaks to Jazz's ability to communicate across borders.
Absolutely. Have you found, I mean, I don't know whether people have sort of, you know, especially in places like the US and places where, you know, COVID-19 has really had an impact, and particularly on young people as well, you know, where their social life and being social and their friends are very important, and, you know, that and losing those connections. Have you found there's been any commentary around that at all, Jazz?
There's definitely been a lot. You know, there's when you're struggling with mental health already, you already feel so isolated. So to add physical isolation when you're told constantly when you're struggling, you know, go be with people. That's what I always say. You know, whether you're going physically to your GP or sometimes you just need a hug. And when you don't have that for however long they've been in quarantine, it becomes really difficult. But it has been really interesting seeing, to be honest, I feel like it was the older generation that probably struggled more, because the younger generation are so ridiculously connected online. So they knew how to do things with House Party, and they were all on TikTok and they were all on Instagram. And it was definitely hard for everyone, 100%. But I feel like during something like lockdown, millennials and Gen Zs were more connected than boomers, because it was
sorry, just a boomer.
So I actually think that the impact of COVID with mental health and isolation is actually, we're going to see the statistics rise significantly within the older generation, not necessarily the younger generation, because they still stayed highly connected through it, as hard as it was and is for them.
And I guess the same kind of messaging, you know, in terms of supporting anyone of any age when they're going through a rough time, in terms of what you're saying about how are you really? I love that. Actually, a question for Jazz, and I'm curious about this too. It is literally, for those of us not on TikTok, can you describe your videos?
Honestly, I hate it when people who know me find my TikToks, because they're very much created for people that, you know, are not my friends. And so I will, you know, sometimes you literally just sit there and you write with text above your head and tell a story. So I'm a director, I'm a storyteller. So I will go back and tell specific stories of my life. Example, a girl that I was in the psychiatric unit with, we were there together for a couple of months, and then she got discharged, didn't see her for, you know, years. And then one day I walked into a school that I was speaking in, an alternative education school, where kids who had been kicked out of school went. And I walked in and she was the teacher. And so it was amazing. I was the guest speaker at her school. So I tell that story, but I literally sit there and I stare at the camera, and then the text goes above my head telling the story, mainly because the New Zealand accent doesn't pick up well on the app, with it being predominantly Americans. Hence why my American following is so large as well, because I don't often talk. But there's trends with, you know, a lot of kids are doing dances and stuff. So I'll do that, but I will like put messaging over it. That's all about mental health and hope, and it's all hope-filled stuff. Yeah, but it's very cheesy.
Question for both of you. What's next for each of you? What's next for you, Leanne?
I don't know. I'm doing a series of masterclasses around the country in August, and then, you know, I've got a few things, as you do, that you're plugging away at. It's not an easy time. It's often what I do. Not so much this film, but often my films involve overseas travel, so it's a little bit tricky. So I'm not really sure. There's a few bits and pieces that I'll look at once I finish doing this series of masterclasses, and then we'll see.
I was supposed to be traveling to 15 countries this year, so that got thrown out. But I'm very much kind of taking what I have learnt over these last few years in New Zealand, and you know, I've really started to understand the global impact of what's going on, and so I'm now working on a new project that is looking at the global story of mental health, alongside some incredible campaigners around 15 countries. So I think I'm starting to kind of look more at what we can learn off each other in regards to, you know, countries and the way that Africa's doing it compared to us, and things like that. So yeah, that, and there's a couple of massive projects that I'm working on at the same time. So it's a little bit chaotic, but my life is always chaotic, so expect nothing less.
How's the book going?
Really, really well.
Amazing. Really
well. It's been #1 in a lot of countries, which is great. It was actually TikTok that made my book go. I put a few videos up that all got, you know, millions of views. And every time that you post a new video, it hits a whole different audience. So it made the sales go crazy, which was awesome. But the response has been just overwhelmingly positive, from people both in mental health professionals, but around the world. It's sold super well in Canada, US, UK. So yeah.
I'm also representing Canada.
You are Canada, and you are
Canadian.
Your Canadian sales agent next to you.
Yeah, so it's gone well. It's gone well.
No, that's fantastic. Well, look, just wanted to also touch on the fact that on the Girl on the Bridge film.com, there's a lot of resources available there for people. Yeah. And Jazz, would you like to tell people other places people can find resources if they need help?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to talk to a trained counsellor, 1737, you can call or text that number 24/7, and they have trained counsellors on the other side. The Mental Health Foundation also has a lot of great resources around how to support people going through this, what it's like for families and individuals, and there's also a ton of stuff on our website as well that has the producers have put together an incredible side series and wraparound content about how to navigate the system and what you can do to help as a parent or a friend or a sibling and things like that. So there's a lot of support out there, but 1737 Mental Health Foundation and our website.
And those links are all on our website as well. So thegirlonthebridgefilm.com, you can go there, and all those other things you can connect with those.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both very much for staying up late with us and doing this Q&A for our online audience. Just to remind our audience who are with us tonight that the film is available through our at-home online platform from tomorrow, 10 a.m. and available right through until next Saturday. So please, do share with your friends to come online and, book the film. It's $10 for a rental. And it'll be there for you to watch.
And there are some more screenings too in theaters. And Jazz and I will be. I'm going to be at a screening in Dunedin tomorrow, and Jazz and I will both be at the Bridgeway in Auckland on Wednesday. So there are some more. There's a number of cinema screenings. People can
come and meet us.
Come and say hello.
Thank you both very much. Enjoy Christchurch and Dunedin. We'll see you back in Auckland soon.
Cheers.
Thanks everyone for joining us tonight.
Bye.